Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is week 8 of biblical interpretations. So hope you all had a good Thanksgiving and Black Friday. My name is James Kaufman. Say what? Yes, and the Vikings lost.
I can't watch Monday Night.
It is terrible.
It's my fault.
My name is James Kaufman. I'm a husband and a father, and I own an automotive business. And I also am a son. That is correct. I have a degree in biblical and theological studies in ancient Eastern history, although I'm not an expert in anything. I've done this every week, and one of these weeks, I'll explain to you why I start this class the same way every time. But for now, I'm just going to keep doing it. So we discussed rules for the class, and I would encourage you to go rewatch the past 7 sessions on YouTube if you need that to be refreshed. Bottom line, I'm a human being, and I'm not perfect, and I don't expect anything from you. I'm going to recap as quickly as I can. If I gloss anything over, please go back and rewatch. Write your questions down, reach out to Pastor Paul, get in touch with me. We can grab coffee and talk about whatever you want. Which I mean that, I'm happy to. So I don't know if you want to sit down with me, though, because I could talk about this stuff forever and not stop. So there are 2 foundational assumptions I make in this class regarding hermeneutics and epistemology. We discuss these matters at length, building a paradigm of thought for the purposes of being able to say the following statement. The revelation of God is inherently contradictory. The biblical text describes a God defined beyond all human knowledge that also wants to be known by humanity. The moment that knowledge of God transcends the boundary between what is not known to what is known, that God no longer is transcendent, but rather is continuous and defined within knowledge from the perspective of humanity. Thus, it is exceptionally easy for humanity to interpret the knowledge of God as being a God that is fundamentally different than what God wants humanity to understand God to be. So this is the fundamental problem the biblical text is trying to address. To me, this is the thesis statement of the entire biblical text. And it carefully tries to walk this line between the known and the unknown, trying to reveal this indescribable God by using knowledge that humans can comprehend, while simultaneously trying to not define God as something different than what God is. This is the primary concern of the biblical text, in my opinion. So the text begins the story by describing God not as creation itself, not like the other contemporary mythologies, but rather describes God as the creator itself. And so the first semantical definition ascribed to God in the biblical text is that God is not like any other God, but rather God is the creator. And so this is the problem. When the creator created, the intention of the creator was for this type of relationship with humanity. But because of the knowledge of good and evil, the relationship is severed and is like this. And so the text becomes concerned with how things can go from this to having a relationship with humanity that looks like this. And is trying to do this without making God into something God isn't. That being a God that is defined by only human knowledge. And so God wants to be known as this without becoming known as this. And God becomes a jealous God because God knows that it is far, far, far easier for humanity to have a relationship with the sun or the moon or the tree than it is for humanity to have that same type of relationship with the Creator. And so here we are outside of Eden, epistemologically incapable of not making God into everything. Separated from God, separated from Eden, separated from Sabbath. And we work. So how do we get to this? How does the gap get bridged? How can the connection be made? How can humanity be in proximity to God? How does humanity get back to Eden? And so last class, we began our mapping journey. Last class, we began our mapping journey. We took map number 1, which I think you all have out. We took map number 1, our Middle East map, and we mapped the flow of people coming in and out of Africa, Europe, and Asia. And at the end of our last class, our maps looked like this. We discussed what is called the land in between. The region highlighted in red, the setting of the biblical text. We discussed the significance of the Suez Canal today and how its modern usage reflects the age-old historical significance of the trade routes that have always flowed in and out of the land in between. That is, the land in between all the empires and nations. The land in between the land people wanted. The land in between Egypt and Babylon, in between Egypt and Rome. And we asked why. Why is the map like this? And I briefly mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we can conclude the fundamental criteria dictating why people are where they are is because of water. And I ended our class last time taking our map and adding the regions of rivers and rain, showing how the trade routes follow where the water is. And this was the question we seek to answer. Why is this the land? Why is this land the setting of the biblical text? Why here and not somewhere more green? And so tonight, we will take our first step in answering this question. Why is this the promised land? And when does it become that? After humanity leaves Eden, we see the first step in the plot to bring humanity back to Eden. And so with that, we move forward. So if you've not done so yet, take out your map number 1. It's our Middle East map. This is how your map currently should look. If it doesn't, go rewatch session 7 on YouTube and get caught up. Now we move forward to Genesis 11, and we see this. These are the generations of Shem. When Shem was 100 years old, he fathered Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he fathered Arphaxad 500 years and had other sons and daughters. When Arphaxad had lived 35 years, he fathered Shelah. And Arphaxad lived after he fathered Shelah 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Shelah had lived 30 years, he fathered Eber. And Shelah lived after he fathered Eber 403 years and had other sons and daughters. When Eber had lived 34 years, he fathered Peleg. And Eber lived after he fathered Peleg 430 years and had other sons and daughters. When Peleg had lived 30 years, he fathered Reu, and Peleg lived after he fathered Reu 209 years and had other sons and daughters. When Reu had lived 32 years, he fathered Serug, and Reu lived after he fathered Serug 207 years and had other sons and daughters. When Serug had lived 30 years, he fathered Nahor, and Serug lived after he fathered Nahor 200 years and had other sons and daughters. When Nahor had lived 29 years, he fathered Terah. And Nahor lived after he fathered Terah 119 years and had other sons and daughters. When Terah had lived 70 years, he fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So exciting stuff. This is a genealogy list. I highlighted an important pattern that we see here in the text. What we see is so-and-so lived and fathered so-and-so. Now, one of the concepts we might discuss more in depth someday are the differences between Eastern and Western thought. Today, in America, we live in what is known as a Western society. We live in the West. This is a normal, everyday phrase and concept that we still use. Ask yourself, why is America and Europe considered West? West of what? Well, they're west of East. Here's a map I quickly pulled from the Wikipedia article discussing the Western world. Here's what is quoted. The Western world is derived from Samuel P. Huntington's 1996 class of civilizations. In light blue are Latin America and the Orthodox world, which are either a part of the West or distinct civilizations intimately related to the West. How many people here have heard the word Orient before? Well, Orient comes from the Latin and means rising, as in sunrise, as in east. The antonym of Orient is accident and means fall, or set, as in sunset, as in west. This is also where we get the word accident from. Occident was used to mean west. But these concepts of east and west are not just describing geography. Certainly, I would say no one uses the word oriental to mean east geographically. We use the word east to mean east. The word is used to describe specific frameworks of culture. They are describing concepts of cultures and thoughts. Western thought generally is about progression and modernity. Eastern thought is generally about orthodoxy and tradition. These contrasts suggest another reason why the land in between is called the land in between. The historic trade between Africa, Europe, and Asia intersects through the land in between, and we find a confluence of the ideals of progression and orthodoxy. One of the very many themes that we see intertwined throughout the biblical text. So I say all this to say, oftentimes I'll use expressions like Semitic thought or ancient Near Eastern thought. And when I say this, I'm reflecting on the traditional Orthodox ancient ideals of philosophies, mentalities, cultures, practices, and languages of the Levant. As discussed in the past, the Levant is a word used to describe the lands of the people who spoke Semitic languages. Semitic thought is expressing the thought and behavioral patterns of Semites. Semites are cultures that lived in the Levant and spoke Semitic languages. And this is what we have summarized as the land in between. And so these genealogies in Genesis, we see an ancient expression of identity that is foundational to Eastern Semitic thought and worldviews. And they are different from our current modern Western thought practices. So-and-so begot so-and-so. Or other times in the text, you'll see expressions like so-and-so, son of so-and-so. We see this idea where the name of a man will immediately be followed by the name of his father. This text is a good example of how identity was understood in the ancient Near East. And so, here we have another one of our marvelous epistemology charts. Now, this one's great because I didn't make this up. I actually learned this specific framework from one of my professors in ancient Near Eastern customs and cultures. If we want, we could use the version that I made in class with the doodles of my 20-year-old self. But I think this is probably better for our purposes. Now, I won't go through this step by step, but here's the full chart. Working from the outside in, we have the people or nation, or Ben Yisrael. Then we see the dynasty. For example, the house of David. Then we have tribe or Shebet. For example, the tribe of Judah. Then we have village or Kafar. For example, the village of Ophrah. Then we have clan or Mishpahah. For example, the clan of the Abizarites. Then we have the family unit or Bet Av. Or so-and-so, house of the father. Or here's the chart of myself. We have James from the house of Kaufman, of the clan of the Kaufman Cliff Marzahns, of the village of Minneapolis, of the tribe of Minnesota, of the dynasty of whatever U.S. president, of the nation of the United States of America. Now, this isn't accurate, and I actually just recently learned the scope of the history of the Kaufman and could chart myself better, but it would take all night. But I think you get the idea. So going back to our Semitic personal identity chart, the question is, what's the question mark in the middle? What's point 1 on the existence of society? What's the lowest common denominator of society in Semitic thought? See, in Western thought, it's this. It's the individual. But in ancient Near Eastern culture, it's not the individual. It is rather the family unit. The family unit, or Bet Av, or house of the patriarch, is the individual unit. Your personal identity was that of your father, and their father, and their father, and their father. And the goal was to be known by your descendants. And so, this is why so often in the biblical text, when someone's name is given, their identity is immediately consumed and identified by their father. And these genealogies would seek to connect people to their family, clan, villages, tribes, dynasties, and nations. The identity from whom you came was far, far, far more important than the identity of you. And so when we see something like this, where the pattern is repeating and repeating and repeating, all of these people had other sons and daughters, but their children's identities aren't mentioned. And we see in verse 26, when Terah had lived 70 years, he didn't have other sons and daughters, but rather he had Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And we see the identities of these people being named. It's because the text is trying to draw attention to a shift in the paradigm. There is something significant here in verse 26. That is why they are named. And so the genealogy outlined before verse 26 is not merely to tell you that so-and-so had so-and-so who had so-and-so, but rather it's to emphasize the significance and importance of the lineage of the three people who are being identified. And you better pay attention to them because of whence they came. That is Semitic thought. That entire passage is to signify the significance of Terah, to emphasize the significance of the next passage. I have a question for you all. Who in here has heard the name Terah before? Who in here has heard the name Abraham before? Would you say it's safe to say that the average person has heard of the patriarch Abraham, and most people have never heard of Terah? So we come to verse 27 and we read, now these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred, in Ur of the Chaldeans. And Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarah, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarah was barren. She had no child. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. This is, to me, one of the most significant passages of the biblical text, and it has had profound influence and effect on my personal life. I probably think about this passage on a weekly basis. So there's a lot to dissect here, so let's begin. Let's look at your map number 1. I'm going to reread and quote sections from the previous passage. One of the most interesting parts of Genesis 11 is this verse. Haran died in the presence of his father, Terah, in the land of his kindred, in Ur of the Chaldeans. This verse tells us several things. 1, it tells us where Terah lived, in the city of Ur. 2, it explicitly tells us that Haran died before his father. 3, it tells us that Haran died before his father Terah left Ur. So take out your highlighter, go to the far right corner of your map. Find the Persian Gulf. Find Kuwait in parentheses. Starting right here is Kuwait. Where am I? Find Kuwait in parentheses. So you're going to go a little northwest, and you'll find the city of Ur, and highlight it. Has everybody found Ur? Cool. This is where Abraham was born. This is where Abraham grew up. This is where Abraham's father, Terah, lived. This is the clan and tribe of Terah. Immediately to the left of the word Ur, you see the word Euphrates River. Highlight that. Everybody good? Okay. So continuing onward, Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his grandson, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So now, take your green marker and circle the city of Ur. Now use your finger, and we're going to follow the Euphrates River northwest. I'll help you guys, but I'm going to read through this first. So you'll see the city of Borsippa. You'll see Babylon. You'll see the modern city of Fallujah in parentheses. Keep following the river. Find Anat. You go slightly left, and you'll see the city of Mari. We want to circle in green the city of Mari. Yep. Everybody find Mari? Now again, use your finger. Go north from Mari along the words that say Euphrates River. Find Tuttle. Go immediately north up the Bali River. And you'll find Haran Karhi. Karhe. You'll find Haran. So first highlight Haran in yellow, and then circle it in green. Yep. Good job. So now we're going to go back down to Ur. We're going to draw a green line, generally following the Euphrates River up to Haran, to look like this. I'll help you quick, Joe.
Thank you. That was Guy calling me.
So highlight Ur in green. Use the green, the yellow.
Oh.
Highlight Ur.
Oh, the green is all river.
That's the green is always the trade route of patriarchs or Israelites. So we got Ur, and then up here, it's kind of hard to see. You got right here this Haran. Just circle that with your green. If you use yellow on there, you're gonna mess it up. Yeah. And then circle Ur with your green. And circle this city here, Mari. And then basically you're gonna do like that. You're gonna draw a green, kind of follow the Euphrates River.
To each circle?
Yep.
Here? Did you have yellow there too, or just green?
Just green.
Here?
Yeah. So just draw an arrow up here to Mari.
See it.
You're good.
Yeah, you got it.
Right here. Yep. And then go from Mari up here to Haran.
It's a trade route?
So the river would be the trade route, but that is the route that Terah and Abram and the descendants listed would have traveled going from Ur to Haran.
They just follow her.
Yep. And that's how you do it.
Where's Canaan?
Gonna get eaten by a mountain lion or something.
Canaan is everything in red.
Oh, that's
That whole region
Oh, yeah.
is.
Yeah, they got lost.
What?
They got lost.
Okay. Is everybody good? And so we see after humanity leaves Eden, after the flood, after the Tower of Babel, this man Terah lives in Ur. He has 3 sons, and one of them dies. Sometime after that son's death, Terah leaves Ur to head to Canaan, to the land in between. He follows the trade route along the Euphrates. Why? Because that's where the water is. That's where life is. He gets halfway to Canaan, he gets to Haran, and he suddenly stops. And then he dies. And then we read Genesis 12, verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, and your kindred, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And so, here are the questions we are seeking to produce answers for. What is the difference between Terah and Abram? Why did Terah leave Ur to go to Canaan? Why did Terah fail to make it to Canaan? Why does he stop in Haran and die? Why does the text specifically mention Haran dying in the presence of his father in Ur? Why does the genealogy highlight that Terah had 3 sons? I'm going to attempt to answer these questions going backwards. Why does the genealogy emphasize Terah had 3 sons? I'm going to read an excerpt of Jewish commentary from Rabbi Ari Berman. He writes, when Abraham sought to find a wife for Isaac, he forbade his servant from choosing a wife from the native Canaanites and ordered him to go to his land and his kin to find the appropriate woman. When Abraham does not explain, though, why a woman from his family is preferable to a native woman in the area. In truth, in thinking of the family marriage patterns, one finds that there is a tendency within this family to marry its own members. Nahor, Abraham's brother, marries Milcah, Haran's daughter. Isaac marries Rebekah, Nahor's granddaughter, while Jacob marries Leah and Rachel, Nahor's great-granddaughters. In fact, later in the story, Abraham tells Abimelech that he called Sarah his sister because she is related to him as she is an offspring of his father. This fact completes the pattern in which all of the marriages of the patriarchs and matriarchs are intra-family unions. In this light, an interesting fact emerges from the story. The patriarchs and matriarchs are all actually descendants of Terah. The importance of Terah as the common ancestor of the chosen family is highlighted by the internal division of the book of Genesis. While the division of chapters and verses came later in history, the book of Genesis is naturally divided into sections through the literary tool of headings. Each new section begins with the phrase Ve'ele Toldot, or and these are the generations. Genesis chapter 5, Genesis 6, Genesis 10, 11, 25, 36, and 37. This phrase appears. In Hebrew, these headings are the natural dividing components of the text. Something I thought about bringing up in an earlier class is that in English, when we open up our Bibles and we see verses and we see divisions of chapters, it's not how the text originally was. In Hebrew, it's completely different. The individuals whose lives are introduced by this heading include Adam, Noah, the sons of Noah, Terah, Isaac, Ishmael, Esau, and Jacob. Interestingly, the one name that is left off the list, which is the one that you'd probably expect to be there more than any other, is Abraham. And the name that perhaps surprisingly appears instead is Terah. Since the section about the chosen family begins with Ve'ele Toldot Terah and is not interrupted instead with Ve'ele Toldot Avraham, Terah is marked as the ancestor under whom this story unfolds. This perspective of Terah as the father of the patriarchal and matriarchal family explains why all three of his sons are named as his descendants. While Abraham stands out as the father of the patriarchs, Nahor and Haran are the fathers of the matriarchs. And as such, all three brothers form the origins of the chosen family. All of these observations beg an obvious question. Why should Terah be given such a privileged place in the narrative of the history of the Jewish people? This question is especially perplexing considering the long-standing tradition cited in the book of Joshua that Terah was an idol worshiper. Moreover, throughout the story of Genesis, it is Abraham, not Terah, who merits God's blessing and receives God's covenant. And it is Abraham, not Terah, who is referenced by all subsequent generations, including his immediate successors, Isaac and Jacob, as the father of their family. Very interesting. So the three sons of Terah are mentioned because Abraham is the patriarch of the patriarchs, and Nahor and Haran are the patriarchs of the matriarchs. And Terah is the patriarchal father of all of them. And that is why his genealogy is emphasized. So, why is it today when you go to church, you'll hear pastors say things like, Abraham was called by God to go to the promised land? It's funny because this gap between Terah and Abraham is one of the most obvious clues that will tell you how much a pastor has read the text. I've sat in both sermons and lectures where a pastor or professor say, Abraham was called by God to leave Ur and go to Canaan. If you ever go to church and the pastor says Abraham was called by God to leave Ur, just know they may not have spent much time reading the actual story. It wasn't Abraham that was instigated leaving Ur. Terah was the one who left Ur to go to Canaan. The entire patriarchal story begins with Terah, not Abram. Abraham left Haran. Why isn't Terah the one who is remembered? I think the potential answers to questions 4, 3, and 2 are the answers to question 1. And these are the reasons why we all know of the patriarch Abraham, and yet his father is not given hardly any thought at all. Now, I'm not saying that what I'm about to say is 100% correct or scientifically provable, but I do believe it is most logical. This is an instance where if you take the pure scientific, academic, hermeneutic approach, you are left going, this text doesn't have any meaning, which is freaking boring, lame, and a bit of a cop-out if you ask me. If you want to live your life with no meaning, have at it. I, on the other hand, would rather ask the question, if the text didn't want us to think about what this might mean, then it wouldn't be in there. Thus, the text wants us to explore, wrestle with, and reason why this story says what it says. Now, we read in the book of Joshua that Terah is remembered as an idol worshiper. His legacy is not the patriarch, but rather the legacy of worshiping idols. Thus, we know from the text this much is true. Hopefully, in a few weeks, we will discuss an extremely important concept within Semitic thought that is foundational for so much of the world and humanity. But it's a concept especially crucial to what makes Judaism what it is, and thus not what it is not. That concept is the concept of oral traditions. And one of the long-established traditions of Judaism is not just that Terah was an idol worshiper, but that he manufactured and sold idols while living in Ur. We read in the Jewish oral tradition called the Midrash from Bereshit Rabbah 38. Haran died during the lifetime of Terah, his father. Terah was an idol worshiper and a seller of idols. One time he went away to some place, and he installed Abraham as salesman in his stead. A person would come seeking to buy. Abraham would say to him, "How old are you?" He would say to him, 50 or 60 years old. He would say to him, "Woe to this man who is 60 years old and seeks to prostrate himself before something that is 1 day old." He would be ashamed and leave. One time, a certain woman came, carrying a dish of fine flour in her hand. She said to him, "Here, offer this before the gods." Abraham arose, took a club in his hand, and shattered all the idols, and placed the club in the hand of the largest idol among them. When Terah, his father, came, Terah said to Abraham, "Who did this to them?" Abraham said to him, "I will not lie to you. A certain woman came carrying a dish of fine flour in her hand. She said to me, 'Here, offer it before them.' I offered it before them. This one idol said, 'I shall eat first,' and another one said, 'I shall eat first.' This big idol who was standing among them got up, took the club, and shattered them all. Terah said to Abraham, 'What, are you mocking me? Are they sentient at all?' Abraham said to Terah, 'Do your ears not hear what your mouth is saying?'" We actually find a very similar story in the Quran. It says, "We gave Abraham his right judgment formally, for we knew him well. When he said to his father and his people, 'What are these statues to which you are devoted?' They said, 'We found our fathers worshiping them.' He said, 'Indeed, you and your fathers have been in manifest error.' They said, 'Have you brought us the truth, or are you one of those who jest?' He said, 'No, your Lord. No, your Lord is the Lord of the heavens and the earth, who created them both. I bear witness to that. And by Allah, will show your idols my guile after you turn your backs.' Then he reduced them to pieces except for their chief, so that they might turn to him. They said, 'He who did this to our gods is certainly one of the wrongdoers.' They said, 'Are you the one who did this to our gods, O Abraham?' Abraham said, 'No, but their chief did this, so ask them if they can speak.'" And so we see that Terah is remembered to have made a living creating and selling statues and idols. He is not remembered as the patriarch. If we go back to Midrash Bereshit Rabbah 38, the story continues. It says, "Terah took Abraham and handed him over to Nimrod. Nimrod said to Abraham, 'Let us bow down to fire.' Abraham said to him, 'Let us bow down to water that extinguishes fire.' Nimrod said to him, 'All right, let us bow down to water.' Abraham said to him, 'Let us bow down to the clouds that bear the water.' Nimrod said to him, 'All right, let us bow down to the clouds.' Abraham said to him, 'Let us bow down to the wind that scatters the clouds.' Nimrod said to him, 'All right, let us bow down to the wind.' Abraham said to him, 'Better let us bow down to a person who can withstand the wind.' Nimrod said to him, 'You are saying mere words. I bow down only to fire. I will cast you into it and let that God to whom you bow down come and rescue you from it.' Does this remind anyone of an idea we discussed a few weeks back? We discussed the idea of how continuous gods are always seeking a higher power. Continuing with the Midrash, we read, Haran was there, and he was conflicted. He said, either way, I will know what to do. If Abraham is victorious, I will say, I am with Abraham. And if Nimrod is victorious, I will say, I am with Nimrod. When Abraham descended into the fiery furnace and was rescued, they said to him, Haran, with whom are you? He said to them, I am with Abraham. So they took him and cast him into the fire, and his innards were scorched. He emerged and died in the presence of Terah, his father. That is why it is written, Haran died in the presence of Terah. And so, why does Terah leave Ur to go to Canaan? Ultimately, textually speaking, it doesn't say. But there are a variety of logical, rational ways to answer the question. Fundamentally, though, the idea is that Terah decided to leave Ur and head for Canaan. It implies some sort of willingness to either follow a calling from God, like we eventually see with Abraham, or at least a willingness to leave his idol business behind. Some traditions suggest Abraham was called by God in Ur and convinced his father to leave too. Some traditions suggest Terah was also called by God to head to Canaan, that he left his world of idol craftsmanship behind and decided to leave the valley of the Euphrates and head for the land in between. Maybe, as the Jewish Midrash suggests, Abraham destroying his business in the death of Haran was either a positive push for Terah to be called by God to Canaan, or a negative push to stubbornly give in and follow Abraham on his journey. Either way, two important facts to consider. One, nobody in that day and age had a rational reason to permanently leave Ur or leave the valley of the Euphrates, where the water was known, where the flooding was precise, where the crops were like clockwork. No one would leave that behind to willingly go to the land of Canaan, where there are no rivers, where there isn't any consistency as to if it will rain, where even if you obtain a crop, you will work significantly harder for far less of a yield than what Egypt or Mesopotamia naturally experience with less effort. So regardless of the reason Terah leaves Ur for Canaan, it is backwards behavior for what humans would otherwise do. Two, ultimately, the motives for why Terah left Ur are secondary to the potential reasons why he failed to reach Canaan. Why does Terah stop in Haran? I like the idea most that Terah left Ur because, after the destruction of his idol business and the death of his son, Terah was originally called by God to leave Ur and head for Canaan, to live a life reliant on God rather than the reliance on the craftsmanship of his idols. We see God create Eden, and that's a positive. Then mankind leaves Eden, and that's a negative. Then we see a spark of life with this guy Noah, who saves humanity from non-existence in the flood, and that's a positive. Noah is a step towards Eden, a step back towards Adam. Then we see humanity gathered together in unity as one at the Tower of Babel, but having done so without the presence of God. Babel is Eden without God. That's idolatry. That's a negative, a false Eden, a step away from Eden. Then we see the story of Terah, and it should be a positive, but he stops in Haran. One theory as to why Terah stopped is because maybe he gets caught up in the same business he left behind in Ur. He backtracks to his old ways. The convenience of the Euphrates, the sustenance of life. He never leaves the river valley. Life is just too comfortable, so why leave? 12 years ago, I read Jewish commentary that I, for the life of me, have not been able to find sense. So please forgive me if I butcher this, but I love the idea of it. The idea is Ur represents a continuation of Babel. Ur represents humanity's capacity to live without God. This utopia, this Eden, where life is provided by the river, but God has nothing to do with it. In Genesis 11:4, we read, "Then humanity said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth.'" The arrogance, the pride, the notion that humanity can have Eden without God, that humanity can make a name for itself like unto the gods. Some say this same pride, this same arrogance, this same desire to be known, to make a name for himself, this is what befell on Terah. That he lost his right to the patriarchy because he became more concerned with making a name for himself rather than living a life that made the name of Hashem known. And so, what is the difference between Terah and Abram? Why isn't Terah remembered as the patriarch? But rather the name he made for himself is that of an idol worshiper. Because he settled. He never reached Canaan. And so somehow the land of Canaan is connected to the knowledge of God. How does humanity keep God as this without making God into this? The conditions of Ur create the tendency to make God into something God isn't. Living in Haran creates the tendency to make God into something that God isn't. So God moves on from Terah, and God says to Abraham, "Go from your country and your native clan. Go from your father's house to the land that I will show you." So it's the differences between Ur, Haran, and Canaan that allows for something about the knowledge of God to be known. And so with that, we will continue the story next week. Thank you all for coming. I apologize if I went too long. I don't even know how long it went.
That was from last week, right?
I'm leaving you again with this cliffhanger. Eventually we'll get to it, but not yet.
Okay. Well, you said that last week.
I'm going to say it until we can get to it.
You said it the week before, too.
You sound annoyed. So does anyone have any questions?
I did, but I forgot what it was.
I also have this extra slide in, but I didn't know where to put it because, anyways, this is the same region on your map scaled to Minnesota and Texas, just to give you an idea as to how far we're talking in terms of traveling distances.
That's in the Middle East.
Yeah, so you see there, and then we got Haran. It would basically be like walking across Texas.
Basically.
No big deal.
Right?
That's a good picture. That's a good slide right there. That's a good slide.
Very cool.
And that's the scale. There's actually an awesome website that does that. You can go on and pick any country and compare it to scale to anywhere else on the planet. It's super cool. Anyways.
What's it called?
Oh, shoot. I don't remember.
What?
Look on Google.
Anyway. Yeah. Any questions? Cool. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.